will you ever hear a disclosure about jihadi groups in the United States and what was truly going on? My name's Salim Siddiqui, and don't bother calling the authorities. They already know who I am, so just relax. Early 90s now, I'm training groups of brothers. We're going out, we're doing training. You see, the concept of training for jihad is still not connected to terrorism whatsoever, and even those who are in the United States are not thinking or conceiving of any attacks upon the United States. You see, I had already been to Egypt and been exposed to what the extremists were like there. All the way from the hardcore people, all the way to the Ikhwan al-Muslimin, the Muslim Brotherhood, and the different people. And I'd already been told crazy things like, oh, you're from America, the land of the infidels, the land of the devils. And I'm like, well, I'm from America, right? I'm not evil. I think. I'm not evil, right? So, I mean, there is this dichotomy, and those of us who come from here, we go over there and we know what they mean. We know that they don't mean that everybody who comes from America is evil, because I'm obviously from America. He wasn't suggesting I'm evil. So what do they mean? Do they mean all of America is evil? And this is an important concept, brothers and sisters. Many times in the East, you hear people chanting and raving about death to America and hatred to America. America is not an individual, right? America is not a single individual. America is a country. It's made up of people who change positions and political positions and power structures over long periods of time, right? But then there are always those who say, no, there are shadow governments and shadow groups and secret operations and secret military groups, and there's a dark cabal, and there's conspiracies, and there's lots of things that you don't understand. You see, I had already been exposed to a lot of this stuff. I grew up a Muslim. Understanding what the Zionist movement was, or understanding the idea of the bankers and the Rothschilds, understanding the secret protocols of Zion, understanding the Federal Reserve System. A lot of these things we were exposed to. Growing up, by the time I was 20, 21, I had read all this stuff. We grew up in a time where people still read books, brothers and sisters. I know many of you are just watching this, but people actually used to read books at some point, you know? This was before the internet. And so I had heard about all the different conspiracies and Masons and understood the different symbols of the craft and, you know, their basic concepts. And, you know, everybody hears different things about dark cabals and secret demonic rituals and that they do different things. But of course, as a Muslim, we always had this concept that, of course, a lot of the things that the non-Muslims are doing, the so-called infidels, whoever they might be, are pagan rituals, and many of them involved drinking of blood. Right? So now, we hear about all these stories, and I'm back in the United States, and I've got brothers who are actually training with me, going out to camps, we're doing training, we're target shooting, we're doing all the stuff that you hear about. And this is where it starts to get interesting. Now, you often hear the concepts from many people in the analyst community about what happens with mujahideen and how secret groups come to order and how different people organize, right? And how there's different networks of people and how they work. And they work by word of mouth. That the authority, the understanding is transferred from person to person by hand as individuals, right? Right? You wanted to hear about it. Just wait. It's going to get really interesting. And so this idea that people now were training with me, I'd come back from jihad, people got to know me, and now this idea that you could go out and train for jihad, but in a Western concept, that sounds crazy. It sounds like you're training for terrorism. From a Muslim point of view, if you all got together and took taekwondo classes, you would call it training for jihad. It would be any form of physical fitness that you were training to keep yourself fit in the path of being a servant of the Lord. Now, what was the final outcome going to be? What is the final calamity? Is there a clash of civilizations? Is there a final destruction? You see, I was one of those guys who already at that time in the early 90s was giving the lectures and teaching people about the signs of the end of days. This is something that all of us were doing because those of us who were out in the field and actually went out in jihad fi sabilillah, we could read the signs of what was coming clearly. Right? The signs that the clashes were getting ready to happen, that the system was getting ready to crumble in front of our eyes were coming, and more people of the light were saying it. But even those who call themselves mujahideen were saying it, and the political ploys of dictators, kings, and royal families and regimes was starting to falsely crumble, but it was still the early 90s, and although things were moving faster than most of us could see, they still were moving slowly at the same time. It's at that time I actually have a brother who comes to me and says, I'm ready to do it. I'm ready to give it to you, Brother Salim. What? Give what to me? I'm ready to give you the bay'ah, the pledge. I'm ready to give you the oath of allegiance. And just like that, the game is afoot. Before I even know what's happening, I'm now the leader of a group of people who are training in jihad fi sabilillah, and they're accepting my authority, and one of the brothers, the first one in the whole world, has come and pledged his allegiance to me by hand. That's strange. He actually ends up being the only one to do it because I stopped letting other people come and pledge because I think this is ridiculous. This is crazy, right? I'm trying to keep things low-key because I realize coming back from Bosnia, coming back from seeing the war, that going to war and surviving it means you don't get to die. You see, oftentimes people see the sign of the end. They see the sign so clearly and they think, okay, that's it. This is the end. I'm going to go give my life in the cause and go. But you don't get to choose when you die. And so coming back from the battlefield, it's like shell shock. It's traumatic. And all of a sudden people are giving me authority. And I'm speaking in the mosques and talking to people, and okay, I'm not a crazy person, and I do have a little bit more information and knowledge than the next person, and I'm somewhat a little bit better read in the English language, and I've got a little bit of the Arabic language because I've studied a little, but I'm still not that well read in anything major at all, and wouldn't even call myself a proper student of knowledge, let alone how often people in the English language call themselves shuyukh, or scholars, or ulama, or people who have actual wisdom, just because they are able to translate from Arabic to English, right? Now, oftentimes people wonder, who is this guy? Is he some Arab? I tell you, I'm here in the West, born and raised here. My dad's from India, my mom's British. I'm not Arab at all. I knew no Arabic until I left high school and went to go study it and learned it from a book. Right? The old-fashioned way, and teachers, and learned and went to the countries and tried to learn. Learning, right? Reading. The old system of doing things with your actual brain and putting together thoughts. But I'm not this wise old man that I am today, right? With gray in my beard. I'm a kid in my early 20s who thinks he has experience, who seems so wise and is now in charge of people who are planning to go to Bosnia, to Chechnya, to Albania, to various other countries, who are training. And people from around the country are coming to visit me in Houston and wanting to learn about training. And mujahideen who were with me in Bosnia are coming to visit, and word's getting out. Needless to say, I'm also teaching and having normal Islamic religious explanations of Quran with my father and relatives at our home every once in a while, once a month, once every couple of weeks. And, you know, the authorities get a little freaked or tweaked, right? So then we start getting the typical visits from the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Start coming, asking, knock on the door, a couple of agents, me, my father, sit down, typical conversations. Are you aware of any threats? La-di-da, are you involved? Absolutely not. We're not involved in terrorism. We're not involved in anything to do with that. Why would we want to terrorize the country that we live in, right? This is our home, right? And still in the majority of the West, there's no connection to terrorism. And many of the mujahideen, especially those who were in Bosnia, who even left because Bosnia was such a mess, and once the UN really got heavy-handed and kicked in a little bit more, the idea of foreign mujahideen became a taboo later on in the war. Now this is the part where things start get weird, because in the early 90s you start hearing people, even in the West, talking about conversations of terrorism and attacks here in the United States, and that there's people talking about mujahideen making attacks and people training other people to learn how to make explosives and develop bombs. And a lot of us who are a little bit more aware of what's going on and had experience in the field start telling some of the younger brothers, listen, you need to start staying away from people who are going to start deceiving you, and stay away from getting involved in any local terrorism activity, because you never know what's going on, who's organizing these operations, whether you're being hustled. Plus, we are not those who believe in aggressive attacks other than those with authorization. And there has been no authorization given from any leader of the Muslims to attack any country that we know of. There are many who claim to have some knowledge. There are many who claim to be aware of what's going on in the political situation. But there is no Muslim leader, there is no Muslim Emir, there is no Muslim Khalifa that has the right to declare war on the West or Europe or England or America, right? We have no Islamic nation to declare war. The mujahideen that are committing the act of jihad in defense always have the right to do so. But an act of aggression requires military leadership. And a small little posse doing rogue acts on themselves is terrorism. But you see, you start to get these confusing ideas, and you start thinking that, okay, there's the dark side and we're the light side and we're right, and people are fighting against the dark, and they're invading our countries and they're killing our people, and they're using evil ploys, and they're using economic sanctions, and they're doing all kinds of crazy things. And you start to think, if they're playing crooked, then we should be able to play crooked. They're not playing on an open battlefield anymore. Right? We want to fight in an open battlefield. We want to fight soldier to soldier, sword to sword, like lions. But these guys are they're in the shadows, and then they send out armies of punk kids who are just the underprivileged and economically disadvantaged, most of them. Yes, we have a volunteer army. God bless America for the volunteer army, and we respect the soldiers. We're not trying to show any disrespect to any soldier in the field. But they don't understand what's going on by their political leaders. As opposed to the mujahideen, who are not conscripted to any army, do not have a jersey or a uniform, do not get paid, barely can keep their guns functioning, and don't have any ammunition. And they still hold the line, don't they, brothers and sisters? They still hold the line. But that's defense. Here in America, that's talking about an aggressive action, attacking America. That's crazy. Stay away, brothers. We're advising all the brothers, stay away from anybody teaching you to get into bombs. We're not into the bombs anyway. We don't blow people up. We're not about the fire. We're real soldiers, right? If there's a fight, there's a fight. But this is a mess, right? Just as soldiers left Afghanistan, things got messy. Soldiers left Bosnia, things got messy. The world is a mess. That doesn't mean people don't have the right to defense, and that doesn't mean everywhere that a mujahid goes to defend anybody else, he has the right to do so. And he should not be considered a terrorist, Mr. President. But this is the part where, for me, I've got to tell you how the truth really works. And if anybody comes and says, oh, I know the truth, I'm so wise, I know everything,